Hello, this is Tina Khanam, your host of K Vision Podcast. Welcome to our podcast. This is season 2, episode 6, and we are continuing with our diversity and leadership series. Today, my special guest is Amanda Cardwell Carones from Italy, and she is a 20-year veteran in the industry and also the founder of Ophthalmology. So please welcome Amanda. How are you today?
Hi, Tina. Thanks for having me here. I'm doing very well this morning. Thank you.
We're really excited to talk to you about collaborating with diverse team members for a common goal. And just to start with, why do you believe diversity is important in our field?
You know, um, I would say it probably comes from a personal experience that I had many years ago when I first started my career in not yet in ophthalmology, but in pharma. So I am an epidemiologist, and a couple of years after finishing graduate school, I realized that I wasn't going to make the money that I wanted to make. So I went into pharmaceutical sales, and the position that I took was probably because of my educational background, it was a specialty position. So when I entered into this division, I was the youngest, but I was the only one who had not worked my way up the ranks into this specialty position. About 6 months after I started, a coworker who now works in ophthalmology as well, that some people may know, Kristen Brotherson, she started in the same division. Interestingly, this had nothing to do with ophthalmology. This was pain management.
Yeah.
And she and I both faced similar issues in that um, all of our colleagues kind of like shunned us. They didn't want to help us, developing our knowledge and our skill sets because they felt like, first of all, we had not earned the right to be in that position because we had not worked our way up the ranks. And I think we fit a certain mold that they didn't like. So we were both, Kristen and I come from the same area. We're both same height, kind of bubbly, blonde, and younger. And I think that they just didn't feel that we brought the same credibility that they did. So remember, there was a 360-degree feedback session for our manager, who was a new manager herself. This was her first role in management. Interestingly, from the same area that Kristen and I were from Alabama, and she was a an African American. So she also, had kind of had to work with some challenges or experience some challenges in her career. So after we finished this 360-degree meeting, um, one of the feedbacks that we gave to Erica is we felt like we needed to get the team working together better. So we looked at our district. Our district was ranked at the bottom of the country of like 50 something districts. And we said, until we start collaborating and teaching each other and to fill the gaps in our individual skill sets, we're going to continue to rank at the bottom of the country. We should first, try to work together as a team to move up the ranks. And then we can battle it out who's number one and who's number 10 in the district, because being number 10 in the district, which is number 10 in the country, would not be bad at all, right? There's no shame in that. So we devised a plan where we had a very diverse group of people and with diverse backgrounds. So I'm an epidemiologist. One other person was an epidemiologist, but we had teachers, we had, you know, arts majors, we had various different backgrounds on the team. And what we started doing is pairing people up with partners and then rotating those partners. So we were starting to learn from people who had similar backgrounds to ours, but also people who had vastly different backgrounds. And when we did that, what we found is that we moved from the bottom ranking district in the country to the next year we were number one in the country.
Wow.
So, it showed when we started, instead of looking at each other's differences, instead we started saying, you know what, I want to leverage their knowledge
Yeah.
and improve my own self, and ask them to help me. We as a team did better. So that's kind of something that stuck with me throughout my career, in saying it's important to look at the skill sets of others and figure out, how can we help each other to both be better.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that personal story. And, that just goes to show diversity kind of leads the innovation in any field, really. And so, just going on to your work and founding Ophthalmologers, can you talk to us about that journey and how did that work?
Yeah, so similar concept. I've worked in patient pay ophthalmology, mostly within either laser refractive or IOLs for the majority of my career.
Mhm.
And what I've seen and some of the challenges that I see today, 22, 23 years in with ophthalmology, are the exact same things that I saw
Yeah,
day one of my career.
yeah,
And, it's a bit ridiculous that 20 something years later, we're still answering the same questions, facing the same challenges. And part of it is because we're so segmented. All of the stakeholders are so segmented and not collaborating together. And at some point, I finally said, I'm sick of this. Somebody has to do something, and we need to start working together as a group, as an industry. So, when I was founding up Ophthalmologers, I said I want it to be all stakeholders
yeah,
involved, whether that's physicians, if it's industry, if it's consultants, whatever the case might be, if it's staff working inside practices, we all need to get on the same page, rowing in the same direction in order to actually grow the market. So, it means bringing in the various different perspectives in
yeah.
determining like how do we collectively get on the same page and move in the same direction.
Excellent. And you've been running this for a few years now. Is it the third one next year?
Yep, we're getting ready for the third one in Sardinia next year.
Yeah. And did you find some barriers when you're, getting that together, and how did you overcome them?
I think the first year, the biggest barrier, of course, it was less from the surgeons. The surgeons were very engaged.
Yeah.
But when I started going to industry, initially, because I'm based in Italy, I think they assumed it would be an Italian meeting. So that
Yeah.
was the first thing to overcome is no, we're not talking about only in Italy. We're talking about, it'll probably start out as being European and then it'll expand. And it actually expanded a lot more quickly than we expected. So
Yeah.
we had quite a large non-European attendance in the second year.
Yeah.
Um, so, the first thing was kind of getting over that hurdle that no, this is not a single country that we're focusing on. This is much broader than that. And then, I think in the beginning there were some challenges with, industry being there and competitors.
Yeah.
And, we really doubled down on saying we're not here for promotional reasons. We're not going to discuss products. We're not going to discuss brands. We're going to discuss concepts that are not covered in the main meetings, concepts that are not covered in medical school, but things that are necessary to grow the market. So, we saw, significant uptake in interest from the non-surgeon, group in year two, and we're seeing that expand even more broadly for year three. I've already had people who have groups that have not sponsored in the past reach out saying we want to be a part of this and we want to help sponsor it.
Excellent. Excellent. And what are the concepts that you were keen to, encourage and elaborate on in your meetings that are not
Um,
medical school?
so two things that have really come up recently, not only recently, they've always been there, but I think they've been a bit more evident in the past couple of months.
Yeah.
First of all, making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of how we drive awareness. That, right now there is, a lot of mistrust in medicine in general.
Yeah.
I saw a statistic the other day that said, I think it was 70% of people surveyed said that they have taken medical advice from Instagram or TikTok
Wow.
and that only 30% follow the advice of their doctors. So
Yeah.
that tells you that there's a huge lack of, trust
Yeah.
with medicine. And specifically to our industry, we haven't done ourselves any favors by promoting brands and promoting techniques rather than simply educating and driving awareness
Yeah.
on, safety, on efficacy. So I think if we can tone down the competitive noise and all get on the same page with how we're talking to patients, that helps. The other that has come up very recently, there have been, obviously there's a huge anti-LASIK movement, is, driving education towards empathy. So there are actually quite a number of research studies that shows a surgeon's empathy scores decline throughout their medical school and residency training. So if we're not teaching empathy and those empathy scores that they had decline throughout their training, what happens when something doesn't go as planned? And
Mm.
how can we re-engage, and relearn some of those skills in order to make sure that our patients know that we are there by their sides in case something doesn't go the way we expect.
Yeah. Do you think that's because or partly due to compassion and burnout as you're training?
Absolutely. I think that, especially, you know, surgeons or doctors in general, do have to deliver bad news from time to time. And I can remember I was married previously, and my ex-husband was an emergency medicine doctor. We
Mm.
were married all throughout medical school and his residency. And I remember him coming home one day and he just completely broke down in tears. And he said, I can remember the name of every single patient I've lost.
Yeah.
And it's that, you have to build up this wall because otherwise I think it would just break you down.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, it's a protective mechanism that doctors have built, but they have to remember that, the patients don't have this and they're scared
Yeah.
that they're not going to recover and they need the surgeon to be there with them.
Yeah. It's a very important point, isn't it? Is how to protect the surgeon doing the job as well as get the best service possible for the patient who's facing you, isn't it?
And I think I heard someone refer to it as second victim syndrome,
Mm.
that, that the surgeons, part of the reason that they aren't able to show as much empathy is because they carry guilt with them. But
Mm.
we know that, there is no profession
Yeah.
in which there are not going to be either complications or in which someone doesn't heal the way we expect them to. I
Yeah.
mean, if you do enough procedures, you're going to have something go unplanned. So you didn't do anything wrong. You did everything you could, but I think that's part of it too, is
Mm.
helping give the skills to say, okay, when this does happen, how do you forgive yourself that something didn't go as planned?
Absolutely. So there's quite, you know, conflicting emotions in the surgeons as well as, trying to get that balance right of empathy for the patients. Now, shall we talk about conflict when you were from your personal experience, collaborating with diverse team members and you came across a conflict? How did you resolve that?
So I think it's interesting because I'm working on a project right now with a startup company.
Yeah.
It's a first in class product that is still probably a year or so away from launch. And we're working on a branding effort.
Yeah.
And in this group of people who are working, and most of them except for me, all of them are direct employees with the organization and they've been there, from the get-go.
Yeah.
So we have a scientist, an R&D guy who is the CEO.
Yeah.
We have an optometrist. We have an ophthalmologist who's the medical advisor who's participating in this, and then there's me. So, and I guess I'm representing more of the patient's perspective, and we're working with a marketing agency to kind of moderate these discussions. But I think the biggest thing, because we all are coming from very different perspectives, um, and it's been interesting because initially we may have, opinions that are 180 degrees apart, but when we stop, we listen to why the others think the way they do, we start to appreciate the perspective of the others. And we recognize that when we're creating this this branding, exercise, that it needs to have a message that resonates with all of the various stakeholders.
Mm.
So, I think really it just comes down to listen and listen intentionally, not listen with your, thinking about how you're going to respond, but listen with intent. Try to put yourself in that other person's shoes, understand things from their perspective, and move forward from there.
Excellent. And all the unconscious bias of the diverse groups comes into it as well, and that affects your decision making. How do you protect against that?
I think, even understanding what may shape some of their perspectives.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have to not just listen to what their perspective is, but understand what led to that perspective, whether or not we're asking questions to clarify and let them verbalize that,
Yeah.
or if we may understand that maybe it has something to do with where they grew up. So, for example, with this branding exercise, this CEO is a US based company, but the CEO is European.
Yeah.
And I'm the only other European voice in the group.
Yeah.
So, but he's been in the US for so long that I keep having to remind them, well, listen, this may not translate so well when you start working in Europe. So, I think that we have to, not make assumptions. Probably the biggest mistake that we make is assuming without knowing the facts or without clarifying.
Excellent. Yeah, that's true. And I just want to pick up on something you said about the social media. And it's true, Instagram and Facebook and Meta and Google, YouTube, you name it, everyone's going there for their information, and the awareness is not there that, there's a gap. They haven't gone to medical school. How do we bring the medical force to the forefront so they're delivering it in the social media and encourage that?
So it's funny. I saw actually this morning a primary care physician who on Instagram, probably she had filmed it on TikTok and then had posted it also on Instagram. And she's like, never at all when I was in medical school did I imagine that I would have to post on social media in order to combat all of the misinformation that my patients get. But here I am. And, I saw another doctor who was like, if you're going to come to me and you don't want to listen to anything I say, why do you come back? Could you go somewhere else? Like, there's no reason to keep coming back if you're not going to listen to my advice. So, I do think the only way that we can combat some of the misinformation is to fight fire with fire and, to be as present and vocal as we can, but sharing truly educational information and being able to back it up. Because it's not going away. We're not going to have these non-medical influencers suddenly stop.
Yeah.
And if that is where the attention is going at the moment, we have to be there as well.
Yeah, you're right. And the other point that you made about diversity driving innovation, it's been backed up in the publication as well from the MIT and the Harvard education establishments. Do we have similar evidence in ophthalmology as well, apart from your personal experience?
Um, in regards to the
Literature,
oh, the empathy scores and I
empathy.
haven't seen anything specific to ophthalmology, and I think it would probably I would imagine that it would fall along the same patterns as with general medicine. This was done kind of generally across medical school students and early year residents.
Yeah,
Um, but I would imagine that we would see the same thing. Maybe it depends specifically on where the training occurs and what types of medicine they're involved in. So,
yeah,
in the US, you're trained in multiple different specialties. So you may work in the oncology unit and you really see a lot of you know sad news that has to be delivered.
yeah. No, I meant the diversity, leading
Oh,
innovation and leadership, and that kind of literature, body of literature. There are some things that coming into the literature about, gender bias is quite
mhm.
present in ophthalmology. There's sexism and nepotism in medicine altogether. So those kind of stories and literature.
Well, I would say in the literature, I'm not sure. What I've been exposed to is kind of, I know that Brendan, who will be presenting along with us on in the session at ESCRS, that he's been doing some research and that there is some information that he's intending to publish there on gender bias within ophthalmology. But I also see bias, having worked in industry for as long as I have, I've seen bias not just in gender, but in like physical location.
Mm.
So everybody's looking at the top 10 countries in Europe, and that's where they want to be. That's where they're placing all of their efforts, all of their investments,
Yeah,
which means it's that much harder if you are in Central and Eastern Europe
yeah,
to get the same level of recognition that someone in Western Europe would get. They have to work, twice as hard. And then if they're also some sort of a minority in that area, or maybe if they're female in that area, they may have even more difficulties than just simply it being related to where they're from.
yeah,
So I think that there's a lot of work to be done there
yeah.
in making sure that they're getting equal representation in terms of publications, podium time, because they have great things to say. They just don't have a platform to say it.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're absolutely right. We're going to come on to the ESCRS instructional course that we're running in September, 15th of September, which is a Monday, 8:30 till 10. We are going to be delving into all of those areas. So we have been in this platform before, not our course, another course. Why should the attendees come to our course at the same time while other courses are going on that's similar?
Because we're there. No, I think the interesting thing about, like I said, I look at it and I see there being a lot more than just gender bias. I see, and truth be told, I'm a female in industry. I've been in the US. I'm now here in Europe. I've actually spent more of my career in Europe than in the US at this point. And I really feel like I can see a difference from when I started until today.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying we're there yet, but starting to equalize the gender bias component. But where I still see a big difference is terms of geographical location. So I think that whereas we don't want to turn away from, unconscious bias, gender bias, but I think we also have to look at other biases we may have
yeah.
that may be holding us all back as an industry. And that I think may be the difference between, our program and some other programs that may be going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not just covering unconscious bias and gender bias, we're also covering how we can leverage those other protected characteristics like coming from ethnic minority
Yep.
groups or different religions, different backgrounds, different geographical location, Eastern versus Western, all of those things. So I think it's going to be an amazing course and we're looking forward to welcoming everyone. So thank you very much, Amanda, for your time. If there's any takeaway from our talk today and discussion today, what would you like to share that with our listeners?
Oh, I think that what we're really hoping for is to have, an open dialogue and a really good discussion that sparks interest, on things that maybe we haven't even considered. We hear so much about, gender inequality, but we don't hear about all of these others as much, especially on professional podiums. So I think it's an opportunity to, hear, to learn, and to open our eyes to see, are there things that we are doing or things that we can affect in
Yeah,
order to move our industry along.
excellent. Thank you very much. So thank you for your time, and it's been a pleasure having you on our
Thank
podcast.
thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Take care.